What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about online safety. 4 real cases. 4 lives destroyed. 4 nightmares that began with a simple click into the internet's darkest corner. Tonight, we're diving deep into the true horror stories of the dark web. Stories so disturbing, so unthinkable, that they'll make you want to unplug your computer forever. These aren't urban legends or creepypasta tales. These are documented cases where real people faced unimaginable terror, all because they ventured where they shouldn't have gone. So, turn off your lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't go online after watching this. Because once you know what's really lurking in the shadows of the internet, you'll never feel safe clicking again. This is the dark reality of the World Wide Web, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed. In 2011, a 26-year-old physics graduate named Ross Ulbricht made a decision that would destroy lives and create a digital empire built on blood money. What started as a simple idea for an online marketplace would become the most terrifying criminal enterprise the internet had ever seen. Ross wasn't your typical criminal. He was brilliant, educated, and had a vision. But that vision was about to turn into the stuff of nightmares. He created a website called Silk Road, hidden deep in the dark web, where anything could be bought and sold. Drugs, weapons, stolen identities, and worse, much worse. But here's where our story takes a deadly turn, because running an illegal empire comes with deadly consequences. And Ross Ulbricht was about to discover just how far he was willing to go to protect his dark kingdom. By 2013, Silk Road was generating millions of dollars. Ross, operating under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, had become the kingpin of the internet's black market. But success brought enemies, and enemies brought problems that required permanent solutions. The first death threat came from a user who discovered Ross's real identity. The user demanded money to stay quiet. Ross had a choice: pay up or find another way to silence the threat forever. What happened next would haunt investigators for years. Federal prosecutors revealed that Ross had paid $730,000 in murder-for-hire deals, targeting at least 5 people who threatened to expose his empire. $730,000 for murder. Let that sink in. A young man who once studied physics was now casually ordering hits, like he was ordering pizza. The communications were chilling. Ross would chat about these killings like they were routine business transactions. "Can you change the order to execute rather than torture?" he wrote to one of his hired killers. But the horror doesn't end there. When one of his employees allegedly stole $350,000 in Bitcoin, Ross didn't just fire him. His advisor suggested that Ross commission a murder for hire to eliminate the problem permanently. The employee wasn't just going to lose his job. He was going to lose his life. The FBI was closing in, recording every conversation, every transaction, every cold-blooded order for death. Ross Ulbricht thought he was untouchable, hidden behind layers of encryption and anonymity. But the internet never forgets. And neither does justice. When they finally arrested Ross in a San Francisco library in 2013, they found him logged into the Silk Road as Dread Pirate Roberts, managing his empire of terror in real time. Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison for creating and operating this digital house of horrors. But here's what keeps investigators awake at night. They never found the bodies. No contracted killing ever actually occurred, according to prosecutors. But that raises a terrifying question. Were these hired killers scamming Ross, taking his money without fulfilling the contracts? Or were they so good at their job that the bodies were never found? Ross Ulbricht turned a simple idea into a billion-dollar empire built on human misery, and for years he slept peacefully at night, knowing he had ordered the deaths of at least 5 people. The dark web had created a monster, and that monster almost got away with it. What would you do if you were casually browsing an online marketplace and stumbled across something that could end civilization as we know it? This is exactly what happened to a user known only as Cadit5 in 2014, and his discovery would send shockwaves through law enforcement agencies worldwide. After the FBI shut down Silk Road, a new dark web marketplace rose from its ashes. AlphaBay was bigger, more sophisticated, and infinitely more dangerous than its predecessor. While most users came looking for drugs or stolen credit cards, Cadit5 was just browsing out of morbid curiosity. That curiosity almost killed him. While idly surfing the site, user Cadit5 found a listing for enriched uranium. Enriched uranium is, of course, one of the crucial components in creating nuclear weapons. Think about that for a moment. Nuclear material for sale online to anyone with enough Bitcoin and zero regard for human life. This wasn't some elaborate hoax or teenage prank. This was weapons-grade uranium being sold like a used car. The listing was detailed, professional, terrifying. The seller claimed to have connections to decommissioned Soviet nuclear facilities. They provided technical specifications that only someone with real access to nuclear materials would know. And they were asking for just $2.5 million. A bargain price for the end of the world. Cadit5 realized he had stumbled onto something that could make 9/11 look like a firecracker. But taking a screenshot or saving the listing would leave digital footprints. The sellers weren't just monitoring their products, they were monitoring their customers. And anyone showing too much interest in nuclear materials without making a purchase would be flagged as a potential informant. What Cadit5 didn't know was that he wasn't the only one watching. The seller's messages were being intercepted by multiple intelligence agencies. Every click, every second spent viewing the listing was being recorded and traced. By simply viewing that page, Cadit5 had painted a target on his back. Within hours of viewing the uranium listing, Cadit5 noticed his internet connection acting strangely. Web pages were loading slowly. His computer was running background processes he didn't recognize. Someone was inside his system, monitoring everything he did, everyone he contacted. The paranoia began to consume him. Were those unmarked vans outside his house really just contractors? Why did that man at the coffee shop keep staring at his laptop screen? Had his casual browsing session just put him on a government watch list for life? But the real horror was yet to come. 3 days after viewing the uranium listing, Cadit5 received a private message on AlphaBay. It wasn't from the uranium seller. It was from someone claiming to know his real name, his address, his daily routine. "You saw something you shouldn't have seen?" The message read. "Now you're part of this whether you want to be or not." The message contained a photo of Cadit5's house, taken from across the street. In the background, barely visible through his kitchen window, was Cadit5 himself, sitting at his computer. The timestamp showed the photo was taken just 2 hours earlier. Cadit5 never used the internet again. He destroyed his computer, moved to a different state, and changed his name. But the nightmares never stopped. Because somewhere out there, in the deepest corners of the dark web, weapons-grade uranium was still for sale, and the people selling it knew exactly who had been watching. The AlphaBay uranium listing disappeared a week later. Law enforcement agencies claim they shut down the seller's operation. But Cat 5 knows the truth. The uranium wasn't confiscated. It was sold. And somewhere in the world, someone now possesses the power to turn a major city into a crater. The dark web doesn't just sell products. It sells nightmares. And once you've seen them, they never leave you alone. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your entire life had been sold to strangers on the internet. Not just your credit card numbers or social security. Everything. Your most private photos, your medical records, your children's school information, your deepest secrets. This nightmare became reality for thousands of victims in what investigators are calling the most devastating data breach in internet history. It started with a single phishing email. Sarah, a 34-year-old mother from Denver, clicked on what appeared to be a legitimate message from her bank. Within seconds, malware had infected her computer, her phone, and every connected device in her home. But this wasn't ordinary malware. This was a digital weapon designed to steal everything. High-profile breaches, like those suffered by MCNA, Duolingo, and MGM Resorts, show the magnitude of the threat and the ease with which data is commoditized in deep web marketplaces. But Sarah's case was different. This was personal. This was targeted. This was designed to destroy lives. The hackers didn't just steal Sarah's information. They studied her, learned her routines, her fears, her vulnerabilities. They accessed her home security cameras and watched her family sleep. They read her private messages and learned about her marriage problems, her financial struggles, her daughter's learning disability. And then they put it all up for sale. Deep in a dark web marketplace called Life Ruiner, Sarah's entire digital existence was auctioned to the highest bidder. The listing was horrifyingly detailed. Complete life package, married mother, financial distress, vulnerable child, marital problems. Perfect target for long-term psychological manipulation. Starting bid, 50. But the horror was just beginning. The buyer wasn't interested in Sarah's credit cards or bank accounts. They wanted something much more valuable, her sanity. It started small. Sarah began receiving text messages from unknown numbers, messages that contained information only she should know. Details about conversations she'd had in the privacy of her own home. Photos of her daughter taken from impossible angles. Medical records that should have been confidential. The psychological torment escalated rapidly. Sarah's social media accounts were hacked and used to send inappropriate messages to her coworkers, her daughter's teachers, her neighbors. Her email was compromised and used to send threatening messages to local police, messages that made her look like a dangerous criminal. Within weeks, Sarah had lost her job, her reputation, and her sense of safety. But the worst was yet to come. The hackers began targeting her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. They sent messages to Emma's school, claiming Sarah was an unfit mother. They called Child Protective Services, with fabricated reports of abuse. They even created fake social media profiles using Emma's photos and school information. Sarah tried everything. She changed all her passwords, bought new devices, even moved to a different state. But the hackers had infiltrated so deeply into her digital life that escape was impossible. They had access to her medical records, so they knew about her anxiety medication. They used this information to have her prescriptions flagged as potential drug abuse, adding another layer to their systematic destruction of her life. The breaking point came when Sarah received a phone call from someone claiming to be watching her daughter at the playground. The caller described exactly what Emma was wearing, which swing she was playing on, and what Sarah had packed for her lunch. "We own you now," the voice said calmly. "And we own your daughter too." Law enforcement was helpless. The attacks were coming from dozens of different countries, using sophisticated techniques to hide the hackers' identities. Every time they traced one connection, 10 more appeared. The dark web marketplace where Sarah's information was sold operated like a hydra, cut off one head, and 3 more took its place. Sarah's story isn't unique. Investigators estimate that over 50 people have had their complete digital lives sold on similar marketplaces. But Sarah's case stands out because of its cruelty, its precision, and its devastating effectiveness. 2 years later, Sarah lives under a different name in a small town where nobody knows her story. She pays for everything in cash, uses a flip phone, and hasn't touched a computer since the nightmare began. But she knows they're still out there, still watching, still waiting for her to make one digital mistake that will let them back into her life. The dark web doesn't just steal your data. It steals your humanity, your peace of mind, your basic right to exist without fear. And once they have you in their crosshairs, escape becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. In 2012, a weird image was shared on forums with the following words: "Hello. We are looking for highly intelligent individuals." What seemed like an innocent internet puzzle would become one of the most sinister recruitment operations in dark web history, claiming the lives of brilliant minds who thought they were just solving riddles. The image appeared simultaneously on dozens of forums, 4chan, Reddit, Twitter, obscure coding communities. It looked harmless enough, white text on a black background with a cryptic message. But embedded within that simple image was a nightmare that would consume the lives of some of the internet's brightest minds. Marcus Chen, a 19-year-old computer science prodigy from MIT, was among the first to discover the puzzle. What he thought would be a fun weekend challenge became an obsession that would ultimately cost him everything, including his life. The Cicada 3301 puzzle was unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. It required knowledge of cryptography, ancient literature, obscure philosophy, and advanced mathematics. Each solved clue led to another, more complex challenge. The puzzles were scattered across the globe, capped in books in specific libraries, carved into monuments, embedded in dark websites that existed only for seconds before self-destructing. Marcus was brilliant, but he wasn't prepared for what he was really solving. Because Cicada 3301 wasn't just a puzzle, it was a recruitment tool. And the organization behind it wasn't looking for programmers or academics. They were looking for assets. People who could think outside conventional boundaries. People who could be molded, manipulated, and ultimately disposed of. As Marcus progressed through the challenges, he began receiving direct communications from Cicada 3301. The messages were personal, targeted, designed to make him feel special, chosen, superior to other participants. They praised his intelligence, his dedication, his willingness to sacrifice sleep and social connections to solve their riddles. But Marcus wasn't the only one being watched. Every participant was being profiled, studied, evaluated for usefulness. The organization behind Cicada 3301 was building detailed psychological profiles on some of the world's most brilliant young minds. They knew Marcus's fears, his ambitions, his vulnerabilities, and they used this knowledge to draw him deeper into their web. The final challenge led Marcus to a dark website that existed only for him. The URL was generated specifically for his unique solution path. When he accessed the site, he found something that made his blood run cold. Detailed surveillance footage of himself taken over the previous months. video of him in his dorm room, at the library, even in the shower. They had been watching him the entire time, but the horror was just beginning. The site contained information about other Cicada 3301 participants, dozens of brilliant young people who had completed the puzzles before Marcus. Their photos, their personal information, and most chilling of all, their death certificates. The message was clear. Completing Cicada 3301 wasn't an achievement. It was a death sentence. Marcus tried to leave, tried to walk away from the puzzle that had consumed his life for 8 months. But Cicada 3301 wouldn't let him go. They had too much information about him, too much leverage. They made it clear that he had 2 choices: join their organization willingly or be eliminated like the others who had tried to refuse. The organization behind Cicada 3301 revealed themselves to be a cyber-terrorist group operating in the deepest layers of the dark web. They recruited the world's brightest minds not to work for them, but to eliminate the competition. Every brilliant hacker, every cryptography expert, every potential threat to their operations was systematically identified through the puzzle and then neutralized. Marcus's body was found in his dorm room 3 days later. The official cause of death was listed as suicide, but his roommate reported finding something disturbing. Marcus's computer was still running. Cicada 3301 puzzles, automatically solving challenges even after his death. The program running on his machine wasn't something Marcus had written. Someone else had remote access to his computer, and they were using his identity to continue recruiting more victims. The Cicada 3301 puzzles continue to appear every few years, always targeting a new generation of brilliant young minds. Law enforcement agencies worldwide have tried to trace the organization behind them, but every investigation leads to dead ends, literally. Agents working the case have a disturbing tendency to disappear, transferred to different departments, or found dead under suspicious circumstances. The most terrifying part of the Cicada 3301 horror isn't the sophisticated puzzles or the global recruitment network. It's the realization that somewhere out there, a shadowy organization is systematically identifying and eliminating the world's brightest minds. They're creating a future where intelligence is punished, where brilliance is a death sentence, where thinking too hard about the wrong puzzle can get you killed. The dark web promised anonymity and freedom, but for the victims of Cicada 3301, it delivered surveillance, manipulation, and death. The internet's greatest minds fell victim to its greatest predator, and their only crime was being too smart for their own good. These 4 stories represent just the tip of the iceberg. Every day, new victims fall prey to the horrors lurking in the dark web's deepest corners. Every click, every download, every moment of curiosity could be your last. Ross Ulbricht's empire of murder for hire showed us that anyone can become a killer when hidden behind a screen. The AlphaBay uranium nightmare revealed that weapons of mass destruction are just a Bitcoin transaction away. Sarah's data breach hell proved that your entire life can be sold to psychopaths who will use it to destroy you. And Cicada 3301 demonstrated that even solving puzzles can get you killed by shadowy organizations that see brilliance as a threat. The dark web isn't just a place where criminals hide. It's a hunting ground where predators stalk their prey, where your worst nightmares are someone else's business opportunity, where clicking the wrong link can destroy your life or end it entirely. Tonight, when you turn off your computer and try to sleep, remember that these stories are real. The people behind them are still out there, still hunting, still waiting for their next victim. And that victim could be anyone curious enough to venture into the darkness, brave enough to click on the wrong link, or unlucky enough to catch the attention of monsters who have made the internet their hunting ground. The dark web never sleeps. And now that you know what's really lurking in its shadows, neither will you. Sweet dreams, if you can manage to have any. If these stories made your skin crawl, like the video, it tells the algorithm you survived. Subscribe and turn on the bell. We drop new nightmares regularly. Share with someone brave or someone who thinks they are. Comment below. We want to know what you would have done. Some stories don't end when the lights come on. This is Dread Dynasty. We'll see you in the next scare.